So at this point, we managed to build our list just fine. The issue is we can't actually do anything with it yet. In our previous example, we went through and we used the for loop to print out every element in there. Unfortunately, we don't really know a way to access these things yet. We can't use the brackets. So what do we do? Well, what we're going to do here is essentially build our own iterator. And let's just go ahead and go for it and start coding. This is what I'll type. First of all, I'll say this is displaying list. We'll put that as my little comment here. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new variable. So I'm going to call create a person variable, and I'm going to call it iter, right? So it's a new variable, and I'm going to set this equal to people, right? So I'm introducing this new variable that's going to have kind of a reference to a particular node I'm looking at. So let's type this in. So let's just say this is iter, right? I have just some other node here off in space, some other variable here, and initially I'm saying it's equal to people, right? And that means that iter is going to be pointing here initially. So I've started this little bit here, and you'll see what happens with iter in a moment. And then this is what I'm going to write. I'm going to do a while loop here. I'm going to go while iter not equal to null. So instead of using a for loop, I'm going to use a while loop. And then here I'm going to need to write 2 lines of code. The first one is going to be actually very similar, right, to the one I have in my array. Over here I'm going to say println of iter, right? So iter is going to be a variable that stores kind of whatever person I'm looking at, right? And it's going to do it one after the other, right? So first iter will look at C, then I'll look at B, then I'll look at A. So if I do println on iter, that's saying, oh, go and display a particular node, right? So initially, right, it'll say, this will be saying, okay, do a println on that node C. And then in here, I'm going to add another line. I'm going to type in iter equal iter dot get next, right? And what that's actually going to do is it's going to advance that iterator, right? So initially, right, the first time this loop runs, right, iter is going to be pointing to people, right? So iter is going to be pointing to this first thing. So that means it's going to print out C. And then after it's done printing out C, it's going to do this iter equal iter dot get next, right? So that has the effect, right, of removing this old kind of reference, right, and updating iterator to be pointing at the second thing, right? So that second iteration of the loop, iter is now going to be looking at B. So B gets printed out, and then iter advances again, right? Iter equal iter dot next, right? So again, this is thrown away, right? We're updating our variable, and now we have an arrow to the thing after B, right? Which happens to be A. So then that loop iteration completes, right, and goes back and starts again, and then it prints out A. And then after A, right, once it gets to this line here, where it goes iter equal iter dot get next again, at that point, iter is actually going to become null, right? So in the constructor of our class, right, if we look back up here, we said that, hey, whenever we create this person, right, we're going to make sure that null is set equal to null, right, to represent that there's nobody after them. While in the case of A, that null is what's going to be in its next variable. So when we do this dot get next, iter is going to be set equal to null. And what that null represents is that we're at the end of a list. So that then, right, goes up here, right, that iteration loop is done. But then over here, this while loop is only running while iter is not equal null. Well, we get to the end, after A, iter gets set equal to null, so that whole thing completes, right? And it'll exit out. So that's the basic block of code, right, that we use to display all the elements in a linked list. So the idea seems pretty sound to me. Let's do a compile, and hopefully everything works out for us. So let's run this, and here we go. This is our new output. We display C, right? That was the first thing iter was looking at. Then we display B, the second thing iter looked at, and then A, the last thing iter looked at. So iter, right, visited each of these in turn, and then each one we visited, we did a println on. So that there is our code to display a linked list, right, or a linked structure. These 5 lines of code here. The equivalent over here in the array was this bit here, right? We had the for loop that when it looked at every single element in turn using that bracket notation. Here we don't have brackets, so we have to manually maintain an iterator to visit each of these in turn. It ends up being more work, but remember that linked structures are a lot more flexible than arrays.